All right, cool. Thank you. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to Art of Design session. So Art of Design is sessions are basically interactive sessions organized by Feelpixel Design Studio. Myself, Nitin Panwar. I'm the founder of Feelpixel, and in these sessions we are basically inviting industry professionals to speak about various topics, and our intent is to learn from their experiences. In today's series, it's going to be special because we have Mr. Dhimant, and uh, and let me first, quickly introduce Dhimant. So he's currently head of products at IQM. He has over 18 years of experience in the industry, and he is an expert in product management and strategy. He has worked with industry giants like Samsung, eBay, Yahoo, and several startups in Silicon Valley. He has worked in various countries such as USA, Canada, India, and that gives him a global perspective that influences his thinking around product strategy. His contributions has helped significant and then his contributions has played significant role in shaping groundbreaking products. So I think that's just like a fraction of what Dhimant has been doing. But everyone, please welcome Mr. Dhimant. Hi, Dhimant. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Nitin. It's such an honor to be here today, and thanks for inviting me to this webinar.
Yeah, so Dhimant, I would like to start with your personal journey. If you can talk about some of the key highlights, which shaped your career and which leads you to where you are today.
Sure. Um, Hello, everyone. I started my career in 2005 as a software engineer. I worked in various engineering roles for around 7 or 8 years, and then I moved into product management. And from last 10 plus years, I've been into product management. And as Nitin mentioned, currently I work as a head of product at IQM. Uh, Throughout my career, I worked with a number of companies to solve their product adoption challenges. I help them deriving the best value from their products to their customers. And as we talk more, I'm going to share more about various experiences or knowledge that I have, and I'm thrilled to be sharing my thoughts. And I hope to provide you with some valuable insights that will be useful in your career.
That's great, and I'm super excited to learn more about it. So just for I think everybody is aware that today's topic is going to be product adoption. So Dhimant, before we get into the topic, let's start with the role itself because as you know, we are a design agency. We work very closely with product people, especially product managers and head of products. If we can, briefly talk about what are the typical roles which you play, and you can also talk about the organization where you are working at right now at IQM. What's your role there?
Sure. So, in a nutshell, I oversee the company's strategic direction. I'm responsible for the success of company's entire product portfolio. If I talk about some of the key responsibilities, then first of all, I work as a liaison between the leadership team and the organization. My role is to bridge the gap between their goals and the team's capabilities. I'm responsible for developing a product strategy that aligns with company's goals and also defining product vision. And I ensure that entire organization understands their product vision and works accordingly. In my role, I'm also responsible for building a product team, providing them guidance, mentoring them, supporting them. I'm also responsible for fostering a culture of innovation, collaboration, and continuous learning. And it's also on my plate to create and manage a roadmap, outlines the priorities, timelines, and deliverables. And I currently work in a startup. We are an advertising technology platform. So as working in this startup, I'm also pretty hands-on on my product management duties. So that involves working with engineers, working with designers, working on user stories, user research, everything.
That's interesting. I mean, it's like almost a center of everything, and you are interacting with almost everyone in the organization. And I'm sure that communication becomes super important, and that becomes also part of your role. Um, let's just dig more into the topic itself. If you can talk about what is product adoption.
Sure. So, product adoption, according to me, is that the aha moment when a user starts understanding the value of your product. So when users start using your product for its intended purpose, when a user engages with the core features and functionalities of your product for solving their problems, that moment onwards is called product adoption.
I see. And then, would it be so difficult to define this aha? How would you recognize what is aha? Because there are so many other terms when you say, right? If you also hear about activation, acquisition, adoption, where is this aha happening?
Sure. So that's a very good question. So let's differentiate all these things, right? First, acquisition. So acquisition means people learn about your services or product. So something like bringing people to your website is called acquisition. Now, activation occurs when user takes a step to start using your product. So for example, when user signs up or subscribe or purchases your product, it's called activation. Now, product adoption occurs when users fully integrate your product into their regular routine. So it goes beyond acquisition and activation, and it focuses on achieving long-term engagement. Product adoption takes into account whether user consistently uses your product or not. Does it make sense?
I mean, yeah, I think when users are starting, they realize the value of it and they adopt in their life. That's the two cents I can take from it. Um, and I think a lot of companies are building so many great products, and ultimately this becomes sort of a litmus test or final test. Maybe it won't be the just the activation, but how people are going to adopt it. So in the entire life cycle, right, uh, how important product adoption is for a company.
Sure. So I believe product adoption is one of the most important metrics for a business for a number of reasons. Like, let's talk about uh, retention, right? So when a customer adopts your product, when a customer starts using your product on a regular basis, your retention increases. And retention is directly proportional to revenue. So uh, as you increase your product adoption, your retention increases, your revenue increases, your business definitely grows. One more thing, like when users use your product on a daily basis, on a consistent basis, they are most likely to recommend your product to their friends and family. So they are first of all, you are increasing loyalty here. You are increasing the recommendation. You are getting new users here, and you are increasing the customer satisfaction. So it increases or it helps the business in a tremendous way. And I would like to add one more point here, like if you have loyal customers who recommend your product, who uses your product on a regular basis, you are building or gaining this as a competitive advantage in the market. So you have an edge against your competitors, and you are ultimately increasing your business ultimately increases, and it helps the business in a tremendous way. So product adoption is one of the most important metrics that every should look into.
So Dimant, what I'm hearing is that also is going to be impacted by a lot of different parameters, like how people think and what they have seen before, what their experiences have been. How do
That's
you
correct.
measure such a thing? How do you measure such a thing, right? This is so vast. How
That's
what would be
correct.
your parameters to you look at it?
That's correct, and that's I mean, that's a very important thing for business, and it's differs from businesses to businesses. If I want to generalize it, I ask following questions when I want to measure product adoption. Like, how sticky is your product? Does your product solve actual customers' problem or not? If yes, how much time it takes for your product to solve the customer problems, and with what easiness does your product solve the problem? So if I want to talk about in terms of metrics, the first thing I would say is the user engagement. User engagement is nothing but how much time a customer spends on your product. So time spent, I also look into the frequency of usage and also the depth of interaction. So we can cover the full user interaction here. I'll also measure time to value. So this is the amount of time it takes for users to start getting value from your product. And also some of the customer success metrics, like percentage of the users able to achieve their goals using your products. What is the customer's ROI? So these are all important metrics for measuring product adoption.
So when we talk about, let's say, specific metric, right? Let's say percentage of time spent, that would also be dependent on many things, right? Why a person would find certain thing engaging, and how can companies find a niche, or something where they can define that we can put this thing, and then that's how that can become more engaging. Let's say to improve on a certain metric, what are some of the measures a company can take?
So there are a number of measures that companies should take. Um, but I want to stress on this, like, you know, what I just spoke about is generalized, right? That you can use it based on the nature of your product and based on your what things your customers find interesting, but it differs from product to product. So I mean, let me talk about some of the tools that I use, right? So if I speak more about the tools, it will be more clear. Like, if you want to measure the user interaction, like user engagement, user behavior, how user uses your product, some of the tools you can use, like Google Analytics, Mixed Panel Amplitude, that will help users to measure your KPIs and also how user engages with your product. um, Also, you can use some of the tools like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms to collect feedback from the users. Tools like Hotjar or Full Story provides you heat map of the users and also the session recordings, so you can see how user interacts with your product. And also tools like Optimizy helps you to do A/B testing with your products and product features. So this will help you understand what feature users value the most. So I mean, if you use this kind of tools, you will be able to measure different aspects of the product based on your product, based on what users find interesting, and based on the nature of your product. Does it make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, it does. So let's say if we talk about, are there any specific strategies by which we can drive product adoption, especially amongst new users?
Yes, yes. So um, yeah, there are a number of tactics or strategies that we can use. So let me talk about them one by one. So first, I would like to talk about is a clear value proposition. So you should be able to clearly communicate the value proposition to the end users. Highlight some of the benefits your product offers, highlight the advantages, And if you do that, users are more likely to adopt your product. So this tactics that you can use. Um, Another thing that I want to talk about is like onboarding experience. So when a user's first time signs up or start using your product, if you have an intuitive user onboarding, if you guide users how to use your product, if you provide clear instruction, maybe some tutorials, it will users are more likely to explore your product at a deeper level, and it ultimately drives user adoption. One example here I want to highlight is like I like Dropbox's onboarding experience. They provide one of the best user onboarding experience in the industry. Um, Next, I want to talk about is personalized user guidance. So each user is different. The way they use your product is different. Maybe their use cases are different. So in this case, if you help them based on their use cases, not generalized help, if you provide personalized user guidance, you are likely to increase product adoption. Um, One more thing I want to talk about is like gamification and maybe rewards. So these are kind of the motivations. So whatever way you motivate your user, that's fine. I mean, your job is to motivate users to continue use your product. And if you are successful in that, if you have more engagement, if you drive more engagement uh, because of these motivations, you are likely to increase your product adoption. Um, there are a couple of other things. One thing I want to talk about is like education and training resources. So we all know that Google advertising provides certification and some training courses, and a number of agencies, they certify agencies, they certify people who provide these services. HubSpot is another example. So they provide these educational resources as well. So if you come up with this kind of tactics, if you come up with this kind of strategies, users are going to use the product, use your product, and the product adoption rate will definitely increase. I want to talk about support and feedback channels as well. So when you offer mechanism for users to provide their feedback, when you offer support channels, when users have questions, when users are blocked, if you provide assistance to them in a timely fashion, it may be live chat, it may be email, it may be community forums, whatever way it is, if users get timely help, they are likely to continue to use your product, and it drives product adoption. Um, yeah, these are all the techniques you can use. But again, I want to stress here is like the effectiveness of the strategies may vary, and it depends on your targeting audience and also based on the nature of your product.
I see. I think there are many interesting points you talked about value proposition, onboarding, personalized guidance, giving gamification or motivating users in any way possible, and providing support and feedback channels. So once, let's say, you are in the phase of defining your product itself, how do you get to know, what should be the exact value proposition we should give? Because there might be some comparative similar products out there. I know that's going to be a very different in-depth topic altogether, but is there any highlight of it you want to quickly talk about? How do companies come up with, let's say, defining a particular value proposition? I know that's going to be very, very challenging for companies themselves.
Sure. So value proposition is one of the biggest challenge while driving product adoption. And I'll tell you the reason for this big challenge, and I'll tell you more about how we can resolve that. So uh, whenever you communicate value, you should make sure that you are able to communicate the value proposition in a very simple words and in a very short message. So if your value proposition, message, or the way you communicate is longer, if users do not perceive the value or understand how your product can address their pain points, it's gonna be a problem. Your users are not going to likely to continue use your product on a regular basis, and your product adoption rate decreases. So this is a very big challenge. And now, I'm coming back to your question, like what we can do to get the best value proposition into the market when there are so many competitive products out there, and we need to make sure that we differentiate our product as well as communicate our value proposition. So some of the things that I've used in my career, it is very helpful. And the first thing is you should focus on your customer. So you are likely to get this value proposition out if you understand your customer, if you understand the pain points, if you understand what things that they value, what are their problems. If you understand that, so focus on your customer, understand your customer. That's the basic things here. Next thing is, let's say once you have value proposition, you need to make sure that it's very clear and concise. So ideally, it should be in a one sentence without any technical jargons, without any specific words that your target user cannot understand. It should be communicated in a very simple language. Um, if you need to explain this value proposition to a user using some example, it means you need to work on it. It should be in one line. It should be very clear. Um, you can use storytelling here. So people are more likely to remember and persuaded by stories than by facts and figures. So storytelling will be a very important thing when you communicate this value proposition. You can use some visuals as well. So visuals are a very powerful way to communicate the value. You can use infographics, videos, images to illustrate the benefits of your product. Other thing I want to highlight here is like um, free trials and demos, right? So one of the best way to convince someone to adopt your product is to let them try it for themselves. So offer free trial or demo to your end users, like let them use your product, and when they start using your product, they may understand the value proposition. So this is also kind of technique or way to communicate or highlight or demonstrate the value proposition of your product. Another thing I want to talk about is like support and customer service. So if you provide support in a timely fashion and in a proper manner, users likely to get the most out of your product, and this way you can increase your product adoption. And also user onboarding and user experience plays a very, very important part here. So with good user onboarding, good user experience, you are likely to get the your value proposition out, and you're likely to increase the product adoption rates.
That's interesting. Dimant, are there any other challenges apart from, let's say, value proposition, which you find are, really big and organizations are facing it?
Yes, so I believe that value proposition is one of the biggest challenge, and uh, support and feedback mechanism is also one of the biggest challenge. Um, if if you do not provide support in a timely fashion, users are not going to continue use your product. So it should be training material, it should be support docs, it should be live chat, whatever it is, but it should be to the point. When users stuck or when user have question, your product should have ability to resolve them quickly and in a timely manner. Uh, Other thing I would say that user experience. Um, so if the product has a poor user experience, usability issues, or not intuitive designs, it can also deter users from adopting it. So I believe that feedback and support and also the user experience are another two big challenges, for driving product adoption.
All right. I think that that sums up the overall strategies and challenges part of product adoption. One more thing I would like to know more about is, let's say, how do you continuously monitor this around, especially around understanding customers' feedback on what they are saying about the product, and in how important is incorporating that and how that plays a role in product adoption.
Sure. So customer feedback is very important, right? When you want to shape a product's roadmap, when you want to drive product adoption, uh, for successful product, for successful business, customer feedback is very, very important. I'll tell you some of my thoughts. Like if you listen to customer feedback, like you understand customers' pain points, you understand what customer wants, you understand customer preferences, and if you cater your product accordingly, you are, you have higher chances of users using your product, and it ultimately drives product adoption. Another thing that I want to talk about here is like your customer feedback validates your assumption or hypothesis. So whatever amount of research you have done, like whatever testing you have done before releasing the product into the market, you always have some kind of hypothesis, some kind of assumptions. And when you listen to customer feedback, you kind of validating that, and it helps you to increase your product adoption. Um, Another thing is like it always has some user experience angle to it. So whenever you listen to customer feedback always provides some insights into how your user experience is. And there are always chances of nothing is 100%, right? There are always chances of how can I make this user experience better for my users. So it, gives you some valuable insights from the customer feedback as well. And as I talked briefly before, like this customer feedback. If you listen to customer feedback, if you respond to them, if you maybe demonstrate that you are taking their opinions into account, customers feel that their opinions are being heard. They are being valued by your company, and you are building trust here. So you are building loyalty here. You are building more engagement here. So this way also customer feedback helps you to increases the product adoption. Does it answer your question?
Yes, yes, it does completely. And I think you must have answered this question already, but I'm still curious to understand how would you define success in this particular domain. So, what would be a successful product adoption look like?
So success is always subjective, right? It is based on your product goals. So if your product goal is like you want to, let's say, increase user base, right? If you are increasing the user base, it's called success. If your goal is to like, I'm just generalizing here, but if your goal is to increase revenue, right? Then if you are increasing revenue by making all the changes, you are having success. And product adoption plays a very important role, whatever your goals are, whether your goal is acquisition, activation, product adoption, engagement, retention, revenue, referral, whatever your goal is, product adoption plays a very important role.
I see.
Does it
I
answer
see.
your question?
Yes, yes, definitely. I think these are all the questions I had, Dhimant, at a very, very overall, there were some repetitive questions which I've eliminated, but in some of the questions you have already answered. So these were all the questions. I would like to also hear from your experience. how this field has particularly evolved. You have been there 18 years in the industry, right? So when you were maybe joining in, and you were looking at how people were looking at this field specifically, how product is being managed. So then versus now, what's the case? Have you seen any changes? Are people more aware and more doing things around it?
Definitely. So when I started my career earlier in 2005, I would say, it was not as much as startup or technology driven as it is now, right? In the last 10 plus years, especially in Indian market, you see a lot of startups, and also Valley has also flourished with a lot of startups, lot of funding, and lots of new innovative solutions, especially driving around product adoption, driving around marketing, driving around revenue. So, I would say that this market has flourished. People understand the value of these metrics now than before, and there are more and more. There are a lot of solution in the market right now, but there are a lot of new innovative ways of increasing product adoption, acquiring users, activating users are coming out into the market as well. So yeah, a lot of changes.
Interesting. So I think that's it from my side. These were all the questions I had. Now I would like to open the stage for the audience. If anyone has any questions, you feel free to paste that in the chat box, and we can pick it up from there. Questions, anyone? No questions? Was it so simple?
Well, I feel that my explanation is very good. So, all people understood what I wanted to say.
So, Devant, we have one question. What's the difference
Okay.
between product adoption for physical product and digital product?
So the basic definition remains same, right? Ultimately, what you want, product adoption means you want users to consistently use your product, whether it's a physical or digital, it doesn't matter. But it depends on your product, how user uses your product. Like, so I'd like to give some examples like Facebook, like, or Instagram. So if I daily spend at least a few minutes on Instagram, I would say that that product is being adopted. And on a physical product, let's say some product I use on a weekly basis. I'm just running out of some examples, but let's say there are some pen and paper that I use only on weekly basis, not on the weekend, right? So if I use it on a regular basis, whenever I go to work, I use that pen and paper. I call that a product adoption. So it varies based on your product, for what purpose the product is being intended to use, and if you are using at that time, it's called product adoption. Does it answer that question?
Yeah, I see a thumbs up. Okay, so
Awesome.
there are a couple of more questions coming up. What challenges companies face while launching a new product?
Um, so when you launch a new product, you need to make sure that you have done enough research on your users, that your users are going to use your product. Um, so before product adoption, the first thing is the acquisition and activation. Until a user has not discovered your product, they are not likely to going to adopt it. So initial challenges, I would say, is acquisition and activation. So these are one of the challenges. The another challenge is like launching it the perfect way. What I mean by that is you cannot launch your product directly into the mass market. Like when Facebook started, it started only with universities. Then it expanded into more universities, then it expanded into other groups, and then it expanded into one country, more countries. So you need to make sure your product launch strategy is perfect. You first launch it to the limited market, collect the feedback, make sure you make your product is iterative. You need to be very fast to make those changes. And then you launch it to a slightly bigger market, you collect more feedback. And this is how you can launch your product to the entire market. So the product launch strategy is important, acquisition and activation is important, and based on your product goals, like when you launch your product, is revenue is your immediate goal, uh, that collecting money from the user is challenging. It is going to be a challenge. If engagement is your immediate goal, like making sure user spends time in your product, going to be challenge. So there are some goal specific challenges would be there as well.
All right.
Does it answer your question?
Yeah, I see a thumbs up here as well. So next question is very related to where you were talking about when you're launching for the first time. So this talks about how can companies identify and target early adopters and kickstart product adoption.
How can a company identify and target early adopters, right? So when you are in the research phase, you should start with a very small and basic problem. You cannot solve all the problems together. Start with a very simple problem and very selected user segments. So let's say if you are, I'm just thinking of an example here. Like, let's say if you are building this social media kind of product, right? So just come up with a user segment that you want to be the early adopters, and make sure you have built a product around their use cases. And when you launch a product, make sure you launch it to that limited user segment only. So if you release that product to that limited user segment, you can get that feedback quickly, and you have more product adoption that way. So this is the way you are likely to get more adopters.
I hope this answers your question, Aman. All right.
If you have a counter question, feel free to ask.
Yes, guys, please, if any counter questions, they're welcome. Okay, there's one more question. Yeah, Aman, please go on.
Next step would be the expansion and growth, right? Like, it's not just identifying the early adopters, but making sure that our product is adopted for those early adopters. So what I mean by that is the previous example that I gave, the social media product, right? So you need to make sure you have enough engagement, like you, your products are your users are using your product for its intended purpose, and your engagement increases day over day or week over week or whatever metrics you prefer based on your product, it should have a growth there. So once you are at that stage, then you think about expansion to the other segments. Then you can think about expansion to the other use cases. Then you can think about expansion to solve other problems. But make sure your product first is have in terms of Nitin's language, right? It should be successful for those early adopters.
Thank you, Man. Uh, the next question is from Sejal. What is the role of product design in product adoption?
So I was wondering when this question will be asked, right? Because for today's audiences, we want to make sure that the adoption of this webinar would be good. So yeah, this is an important question. So okay, let me talk about um, user design, like user onboarding and user design. Um, so let's start with the onboarding process. So a well-designed onboarding process helps users to understand the product quickly. And if you have a clear instruction, intuitive interface, users are more likely to understand the value of your product. And when they understand the value of your product, they are going to be the users of your product. They are going to use your product on a consistent basis, and it ultimately increases the product adoption. So I highly focus on onboarding processes. um, One more thing I want to say that is like, uh, UX and design is an opportunity for us, for product managers, for companies to highlight the value proposition. So don't just think in terms of like, I am, designing this just to so that user can use the product. No, it's not for that. It's an opportunity for you to highlight your product, highlight the value proposition your product provides to the end users. So showcase the benefits, highlight the key features, demonstrate the real life use cases. And if you do that, users are going to be your product. Users are going to use your product more, and it ultimately drives product adoptions. Um, Another thing I want to talk about is user engagement. Like, so it's the amount of time user spends on your product. So if you have a good design, if you have a good UX experience, users are going to spend more time on your product, and you are driving the engagement. And when you are driving the engagement, you are driving the product adoption. Um, One more thing that I briefly talked before, like it should be very clear and simple. The bottom line is the simpler your product, the higher your adoption rate, period. If you have a complex or confusing product, your users are more likely to frustrate. It hinders their ability to understand the value proposition your product provides. So your design should be as simple and as clear. And if you have them, you have very higher chances of higher product adoption rate. Next thing I want to talk about is the retention. So if your design is very good, users are continue to use your product more and more. They are going to come back to your product, and it ultimately increases your retention rate. It ultimately increases your product adoption. It ultimately increases your revenue. So this is also, so design also plays a very important part here. And the feedback and support, right? So if your product has a mechanism for users to provide feedback and seek support whenever they need, uh, you are you are having this commitment to the user success, that we are committed for your success. We are here to help you out. You are spreading this message, and this way you are building trust. You are reducing user frustration, and you are increases the likelihood of adoption here. So for all this factor, design plays a very important role in user adoption.
I'm sure all the designers would love it, and we feel and we also take pride in that we are adding some value and impacting lives through products. And thanks for highlighting that, Dhimant. We have one more question from Janvi, who's asking how to help users articulate their problems. She's saying that she finds it almost challenging and very most challenging while trying to figure out why the adoption is so less.
You said how to help users to articulate their problem. Why we want to articulate their problem? We want to provide solutions to them.
Janvi, feel free to pitch in if you have any counter questions here.
Yeah, so my question was during the research process, right? Like when you talk to a select few users, I think sometimes when the problem is very abstract, even like finding out the whys is a little difficult because so sometimes figuring out the questions is a challenge, is what I wanted to ask. Because of course there are some, when you go to amplitude and all, you get a very like a quantitative answer, right? But when you look at the quality of it, like a qualitative research, that time you of course talk to some users, and I find that people are not, like, not everybody is very good at articulating it. So that's what I meant.
Got your question. So one thing that I have experienced in my career is like, don't ask just why one time, but ask why 5 times. So, sometimes I came across this very famous quote. I guess it's by Ford founder. Like, if I listen to my users, like, if I just solve their problem, I would build faster horses and not cars, right? So you should not just ask question once and understand what they want to do, but go deeper. Like, if they say that I want faster horses, just ask them why. If they say that I want to go faster, ask them why. Right? If you go deep down into this, you will realize that the main problem is communicating from one place to another place takes time. That's the main problem. And you will be able to find this only if you ask the same question again and again and again. So when you ask uh, one time why, whatever answer they provide, ask why one more time. And the thumb rule here is ask why 5 times. And when you go 5 level deep, you will be able to find the real reason what the problems are.
All right. Thank you so much.
Next question we have from Deepak Saini. What are some of the ways of educating users about a product other than the documentation?
It's a very good question. So uh, few things that comes into my mind. One is the good UX. What I mean by that is when user explore your product, make sure you clearly highlight like what they can do, what are the limitations here, uh, what kind of scenarios they will be able to execute. So some of the strategies that we follow in our organization is like, so there are a couple of ways. One is like an information icon. When you mouse over on that icon, you see some of the help messages there. And there are other ways like you provide information icon and clearly mentions that. So without mouse hovering, user will be able to see that. You can also communicate the limitations and the best use cases for that. So this is the way you can communicate. Um, other than that, I would say that like one is the onboarding process where you guide users. There are some ways like tools like intercom that helps user. Like if you reach to a certain stage in your product, if you click on certain button, a pop-up message appears like this is the way you can help, or you can accomplish, this is the way you can accomplish your goals, or you this is the way you can move forward. So these are the UX and design ways that ultimately helps users without documentation to move forward, and it really helps in driving product adoption as well.
Right, even I personally feel that documentation becomes like a very side piece. Nobody would like to go and
I
read a particular documentation. If it is contextual on the flow itself where you are stuck, then maybe it is helpful. Deepak, I
That's
hope that
correct. and
answers.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and I just want to add one more thing. Like when we say reading documentation is kind of tedious and challenging, people sometimes think about videos and all. So videos will be helpful, but again, it should be a short duration. It should be to the point. Maybe some product demo highlighting features so that users are likely to use and likely to adopt when they're stuck at one point, like, and when they want to explore new products. In a day-to-day scenarios, this design and UX, will help.
All right. I see a thumbs up from Deepak, taking that question has been answered. Next question
Thanks,
is from
Deepak.
Nancy. Uh, so Nancy is asking if the product adoption is gradually decreasing after a certain period of time. Are there any ways to revive that?
Yes. So before that, I mean, when you say product adoption started decreasing, right? Uh, uh, what my way is, you should continuously monitor product adoption. You should continuously monitor engagement, retention, time to provide value, customers ROI on a regular basis. So before you get this gradual drop, you get a hint like it's going in the negative direction. I mean, not after a certain amount of time, but when it started decreasing, you get this hint. And at that time, you should start researching. And when you work on these metrics, like, uh, let's take an example of an engagement, like how much time a user spends on your product. So, you see the drop in the product adoption. You still get some of the metrics that's related to the decrease in production rate. So it's because of the decrease in the user spend time on your product. If yes, why users spend less time on your product? Are they stuck anywhere? Then use those tools that I mentioned about, like go through some of the session recordings where user is stuck. What kind of problems are they facing? So you need to dive deeper and deeper. And once you dive deeper, you always find some answers. Does it answer your question?
I see a
Yes,
thumbs
sir.
up. So, Dhimant, how easy it is to identify the exact problem?
It's
In
very
terms of
is one of the hardest part is to identify the exact problem, because I mean, in my experience, like, people don't know what the problem is. Like, they're like, we want to do this, we want to do this. I mean, it's our job to counter question them. It's our job to do research. It's our job to understand their purpose is, what they want to achieve, what are their goals are, and based on that, we need to finalize the problem. So yeah, it's very hard, and there should not be only one way to identify the problem. It is based on your product, based on what your users want to achieve, based on what your company's objectives are. You should always be find new ways to identify the problems.
So next question I have again from Janvi, and she is asking about, should designer also lead the research process? Now I would also like to elaborate on that question, because as designers we are also we have to start from research. Who are the users and what are their pain points and what motivates them, and we also look at the market in general. What are the competitive products out there, and try to understand their journey and everything. And then there comes the product side as well. You guys also have a huge research part. And so the coming to the specific question, do you think the designers should lead the research process, or it's just that they should design, or is it just like both functions we can run separately, like product people are doing their research and designers are doing their research? What are the differences between these?
So see, uh, having a company or a product, it's not one person's job, right? And it should always be a team effort, right? Uh, as you mentioned, product managers do the research part. They come up with, they talk to the customer, they come up with some real life problems. But it does not always end at this stage. I mean, it's not like, I have done my part, now it's your part to take it further. If I give you a very simple example of a cricket team, like cricketer batsman says that, okay, my job is just to score runs, and bowler says that my job is just to bowl, I'll never bat, right? So it doesn't work. We sometimes saw that, like, bats a bowler also score runs and wins matches. So it's always a collective effort, and it's a team effort. And one of the reasons I can think of is, like, the thinking processes are different, right? Like, uh, product managers always think about how this product will benefit the company, and how this product will solve customers problem, right? That's the key thinking process of a product manager. Designers think about what should be my best design to solve the customer's problem. Engineers think about how can I build this product best way to solve the customer's problem. So when you have this, different approaches towards solving the problem, you come up with the best product output. So I always welcome research on everyone's part, right? Even a software engineer, you talked about only designers, but I should say that even a software engineer can also research. Software engineers can also think about, how the product that I'm building helps customers problem. This is the thinking it they should have in their mind. Like, if you have this approach, then and only then you will be able to build successful product, right? If a software engineer builds a product without understanding the customer's pain point, it may be a product, but I would say that it may not be the best product. So in my team, I always make sure that all the designers I work with, all the software engineers I work with, all other people I work with, they understand what we are trying to build, and they contribute in, ultimately providing a solution to the customers.
Thanks, Dhimant, for answering that. Uh, Let me know if there are any more questions from the audience. So I think there are not many questions now. I don't see any questions coming up. But to summarize this, Dhimant, you know, as you talked about that there are so many people working with you, and you also have to look at the management part as well, right? If you can talk about, let's say somebody wants to get into the journey of or want to become a product manager and pursue that role, any advice you want to give to who are aspiring to become one?
Sure. So, uh, one thing, like, if you want to become a software engineer, you've done some, engineering education or maybe engineering courses or something, and you become software engineer. Like, because you start learning about coding and you can code certain, you can build some product. Product manager is not that journey. Product manager, anyone can become product manager. First of all, a software engineer can become product manager. I come from software engineering background. Designer can become product manager. Accountant can become product manager. HR can become product manager as well. Right? The main thing about product management is you understand the product, you understand the customers, you understand their problems, you find ways to solve their problems. This is the main thing. And when I changed my career, I did some certification courses. I built some side projects. I actually found some opportunities. I actually, uh, I actually did something to find some of the opportunities in my company to work as a product manager. So it was not an easy journey, but it ultimately paid off. This is what I wanted to do for the rest of my career. And uh, I would say that, read books, attend courses. Like, you need to, the main thing you are doing here is changing your thinking process. And once you achieve that, once you start thinking as a product manager, you become product manager. You don't need anything else. So have some courses, do some side projects. It's going to take time, but ultimately it will pay off.
Thanks, Dimon, for sharing it. We have one last question. I hope this is the last question from Deepak again. And
Sure.
he's asking about, should product designers also involve themselves and contribute in product strategy?
I would say yes, not just product designer, right? My answer, as I told you, the same about the designer, whether designer should do research or not, is the same answer. Like, it's a team effort. Okay, I take the responsibility of finalizing the product strategy, but it does not mean that others cannot do anything about it. Like, you can talk to me, you can do your own research. If you have some new thoughts, I came up with one product strategy. If you think that my product strategy is not best, if you have better approach toward it, or if you come up with a better product strategy, just talk to me, right? I mean, it's open to everyone. And as I told you, right, for building a successful product, it takes a team effort. It's not one person's job. If one person just focuses on his or her task, the output will not be a successful product. So yes, to answer to your question, yes, you should contribute. If you have your thoughts, you should talk to your product manager. And whenever you get a chance, like if you have an aspiration to become product manager, if you have an aspiration to work in the product strategy, just start working on that. Just start contributing, but make sure your contribution are valuable, right? Make sure you've done some research, right? You just don't provide your thoughts based on because you think that's the best, but you have done some research. You have data, you have some stats to prove it, you have some backup for that as well. So just do that, and yeah, you can contribute.
Dimant, are there any ways by which designers can also develop product thinking? Because sometimes I've seen that designers are just too stuck on the page they are designing. They're not thinking, about the entirety of the product itself.
So whatever you do, take it as a product, right? So let's say you designed a page, right? But that page design is your product, right? So you are a product manager for that page design, right? Um, if you are writing a resume, right? So resume is your product. Make sure you build your product for your, for your target market, and the product works for your target market. So, uh, yes, so designers can, work on the product side. But I mean, what I'm trying to say here is change the, approach here. Like, it doesn't mean you are just designing, you are not doing anything else, right? The page design you are coming up with is your product. And if you develop the best product into the market, I mean, you are one of the best product managers for that page design, right? So yes, you can.
All right, I think we are on time. But thank you so
Yep.
much, Dhiman, for joining in today and giving your valuable time. And I also want to thank the audience who joined in here. I hope we all learned something from the session today, and we should be applying that knowledge on the day-to-day basis on the different projects that we are working on. And thank you so much, Dhiman, for joining, and I wish you all the best for the further journey.
Thanks, man. I'm thrilled to be here today. Thanks for giving me this opportunity, and I hope that whatever I talked about, everyone should get something out of it. For everyone, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is Dhimant210. If you have any further questions, feel free to directly contact me. I'm happy to share my thoughts and happy to help you out in your journey.